Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session of Rumination with Andrew. Now, this morning, we are going to discuss a very important topical matter. My voice is not 100% this morning, so I hope that you will follow me closely as I articulate some of my opinions and thoughts that are on my mind. Now, this morning, I'm going to speak briefly on the recently held local government elections in Jamaica. Now, I opened the paper this morning, and the Gleaner is reporting, that's the Jamaica Daily Gleaner, is reporting that claiming victory. That's its first piece of news. And here you have a picture of Andrew Holness, that's the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and his team, or some members of his team. It appears that the ruling Jamaica Labour Party is on target to win the 2024 local government elections, even though the results from the Electoral Office of Jamaica, EOJ, were inconclusive up to early this morning. Prime Minister Holness late last night said that the JLP had won the local government elections without question. So here we're seeing that the party continues, because that's what it's all about, right? It's a party, it's fiesta, right? And there's nothing that Black people love but fiesta and dancing, continuous dancing, right? Because that will help to alleviate the pain and the sorrows and the agonies that you have to endure from day to day. But when we look at the political machinery in most of our countries, including the United States of America, we understand that we do not have democracy as we think you have. What you have really is a uniparty where in which the global elites and the local elites control the two main political or major political parties. In Jamaica's case, it's the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party. And for a long time, Jamaicans have not seen the difference between both political parties. Yes, they sometimes think that the one particular political party is responsible for the suffering or the sufferings that they are going through, that they have to endure from day to day. But a lot of times they are not looking at the international perspective and the exogenous shocks that might affect the Jamaican economy. They're looking at their leaders and as if their local leaders are running the show. And I have said on this channel for so many times that the Jamaican leaders, the Jamaican political leaders, are not running the show, right? They're just a part of a hierarchical structure that they have to obey and that they have to follow. And many of you still believe that your politicians are down there and that they are working in the best interest of the people. Some of them might be, and they might, because of their whole ethical standards, they try to, as much as possible, adhere to high standards and try as much as they can to help their constituents. But for the most part, the political machinery in Jamaica is a neo-colonial one. It is rooted in neo-colonialism. And I'm sure that terminology is something that should be quite, should I say, common knowledge in Jamaica and around the third world particularly, that we are living in societies in which the former colonial powers are the ones who run the show. And they are the ones who make the major economic policies and political policies of our countries. We understand that during slavery and even during colonialism, you had governors, for example, in the context of Jamaica, even though Britain was the official power, but after emancipation, after Jamaica received its emancipation, we were still under the leadership of the British Empire, and they would send a governor to Jamaica to run the show. And he was the one who responded back to the monarchy, letting them, he or she, know what was happening in the colony. The same thing is happening in the United States now is the reigning empire of the world. And though she might not have de facto colonies, but through economic and military might, she runs the show. And every country in the world have to give some sort of report back to Washington on how it is governing its society. And Washington often dictates economic policies that are in her best interest and not in the best interest of the country um, that is seeking her assistance. Now, in the case of the IMF and the World Bank, Jamaica has been going to the IMF, since perhaps the 1970s, right? 1977, 78, thereabout. And we continue to have this system, we continue to be under this system. And that is what we call the structural adjustment program under this neoliberal economic agenda. Now, many people, we know that the IMF and the World Bank were institutions that were created under the Bretton Woods Agreement, right? That after World War II. But as far as we know, this Bretton Woods, institution or infrastructure collapsed in the early 1970s. So it means, therefore, that system did not work. It was disastrous. Since then, the IMF and the World Bank, they go around the world pretending as if they have been reformed, even though we know that the Bretton Woods infrastructure was disastrous and was untenable. But we continue to go to the IMF, and the IMF continues to deceive us, and we continue to be deceived by them and let people think that there is surplus here and surplus there. Now, my question to you sometimes, when the IMF speaks about surplus, right, in your budget, do you really think that there's a surplus? How can you be in debt, in high debt, and yet have surplus? It's not going to be surplus for you. It's obviously surplus for the elites and not surplus for the masses, because the IMF is not running the show for the common man. The IMF is running the show for the military elites, for the political elites, and for the financial elites, right? It's not running the show or the economy for you, the people, the common man. And that is what you need to understand. So whether or not the JLP or the PNP wins the election, it does not matter. What matters really is that you are following the policies that are coming out of Washington, for example. The key policies of Jamaica are not policies that come out of Jamaica. And the ones that come out of Jamaica are ones that are programmed, right? That in which they have these economic models, and it doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't bear, or it doesn't align with, it doesn't synchronize with the realities that afflict modern Jamaica. So you have to understand that our politicians are not there to take care of you and to supply your daily needs. You are the ones who have to hold your politicians accountable. In recent times, I have seen a situation, perhaps since the 1970s, in Jamaica, where people depend on politicians as if they are their parents. This paternalistic sort of relationship that you have with your government. You need to stop it. They're not your fathers, they're not your parents. And you have to be held accountable for your own economic conditions. Yes, they are leading, and that's why you have to be informed about their leadership and how politics works. Because many people in the world, including in the United States, do not understand how the political system operates. Even those who have gone to college do not understand it. And that is why we see that people are sometimes often biased, and they say, I'm going to be a diehard PNP or a diehard GLP, a diehard Democrat or a diehard Republican. It doesn't make any sense. And for people who understand the political system, they understand that either of the parties, they are actually working with the global and local elites of the country in which they live. There is a political structure that you have to be aware of, and you need to study and to teach your children to understand, because if they don't understand these systems and how they operate, then they are going to be exploited, and they are going to go right back on the plantation. As we are celebrating Black History Month, one of the things that we need to understand is that while the slaves, before emancipation, knew that they were slaves because they had chains and they were bought and sold right? And they were treated as chattel. They knew that they were slaves because how they were treated, not that they accepted it because they fought against it, but the fact of the matter is that they were coerced into believing that they were slaves, even though they were not, right? Because the slaves never accepted that they were slaves, and that's why you had slave rebellions. They understood that they were not going to submit themselves to another inferior creature of the soil. However, the reality is that they were forced to, and they had to conform to for all the years that they conformed because of the rigid structure that had been created. Now, the fact that they understood, even though they rejected, but they understood the reality, they understood that, yes, the chains were on our feet, the chains were on our hands, right? And we were treated as shackles. That was the reality. In our modern world, we are enslaved economically, politically, and in other facets of our lives. And yet still we have not yet come to grips with that. That is the most dangerous form of slavery, to be under a system of slavery and not understanding that you are under that system, that you are enslaved, that your minds have been enslaved. That is the most effective form of slavery. You don't have to have a physical chain over your hands. I think the worst form of slavery that anybody can have is slavery of the mind, mental slavery, right? Mental slavery, I think, perhaps might be the worst form of slavery, because if you can accept that you're a slave, then eventually you will be sent on a plantation, which many of us are living already on the plantation, right? You believe that you are free, but you are not free. So the political situation in Jamaica and what is happening down there, we understand that there's nothing substantive coming out of that system. And we don't even know what are the economic policies that our politicians are, crafting. We don't know the vision that they have to lead that country. We just hear these broad terminologies about climate change and other things, but there is nothing that suggests that they have an economic vision in terms of where they want to lead that country to. They in terms of production, we don't know what's going on. It's just haphazard. Everything is done in a haphazard manner. And life continues. Life goes on. And because the people are not critical enough and are not willing to question, to ask their politicians hard questions, our politicians continue to show us that they are superior to us in terms of having the big stick over us, and we continue to follow them. And, one of the things I find very interesting is how human beings never learn. We never learn in terms of understanding history and seeing how oftentimes we repeat the pages of history. And when you look at the fact that we had recently a health emergency and all of the events that followed that health emergency, all the policies that were implemented, and we're seeing the effects of those policies right before our eyes. These policies, the effects of which are being played out right before our eyes, and we continue to trust our politicians. I find that to be amazing. Amazing that people have not yet even understood, have not yet begun to understand. They have even stopped talking about that because that has passed, right? It has passed, and it has no bearing on the present. And this is to show you how we treat history and how we treat our leaders in terms of understanding the policies that they formulate, the policies that they implement. We do not learn from what they did yesterday, so they continue to do the same things and worse the following day, which will wreak devastating effects on our social and economic well-being. And we've got to understand that. How can you trust the current crop of politicians what took place after what took place some years ago? How could you trust them with your very lives? And I'm not going to repeat that because this platform will not allow me to express myself in the way I would like to express myself. But we have doctors who are calling out and saying, what is happening? Why aren't our politicians talking about excess death? For example, the excess deaths that are happening in the world. And I'm sure some are happening also in Jamaica. Nothing is being said. But we continue to have these political fiestas, right? These political parties, and that in which our politicians continue to entertain our people. I saw Anne-Marie Vaz and her husband dancing and having a fun, while I'm sure the majority of the people are suffering. Too much dance, Anne-Marie Vaz, and it's too much dance. I would like to hear you craft some important policies. And I've heard you, once or twice, and you seem to be an individual who is seeking the best for your constituents. But this constant dancing and engaging your constituents in dancing is nonsense, right? We are in the 21st century and we need to grow up. And for the most part, the people in Jamaica have not yet grown up. They're still thinking that we're living in the 1970s, that we're living in the throes of the Cold War, and that Jamaica is crafting its own policies and is in charge of its own destiny. And that is not the reality. That is not true. And peace, as I've suggested before, harmony cannot be built on lies. Love, peace, and harmony have to be built on truth. And, this Bob Marley going to sing at a peace concert, wonderful. I'm happy that he was able to do that and to unite the JLP and PNP. Do you think that his music could have united the JLP and the PNP? If, having accepted the truth, both parties were willing to unite and Bob was able to go, which he went to the concert and join their hands together as a symbolic gesture, yes, perhaps. But both of them, as far as we know, as far as the history tells us, were still at loggerheads before the peace concert. No concert about jumping up and singing is going to bring about peace. That is nonsense. That is nonsense. And you know that. You can't go to have a concert and, it's just like a man and a wife who have been lying to themselves and they listen to some music and they begin to dance and then that creates peace. No. They first have to discuss, they have to understand, they have to unveil the things that are affecting the relationship. And that they have to unveil the truth. And then they can begin to heal. And yes, then afterwards they can listen to some music. And the music will enhance their emotions and, perhaps help to mend the relationship. But you cannot have Bob Marley being a musician. What sort of responsibility were we putting on him? Much less the world. Bob Marley could not have brought about peace in the world. He can't, right? What we need right now is first the truth. Abraham Lincoln, when he decided to free the slave, to emancipate the slaves, had to confront the truth. He had to confront the truth. Because remember too that Abraham Lincoln was not willing to even have African Americans be involved in the Civil War because he too was trying to avoid that problem that the Civil War was over slavery. Even Abraham Lincoln wanted to avoid that reality, that this Civil War is not over slavery, it's about state rights. It's about the states and who has the right to do what and does not have the right to do, whatever. Right? But it was Frederick Douglass who had to convince him that this war was really about, that the Civil War was really about slavery. And there is no way you can have half of the country free and half of the country enslaved. Right? And Abraham Lincoln, give him his credit, had to accept that fact, the reality. He might not have been happy with it, but it was the truth. You can't have a country in which half the country is enslaved and another half is in so-called liberty. And it was not the entire North that was free, because we're understanding that even some states, even including New York, had slavery. Right? So we have to confront the realities. and not to suggest, therefore, that some music or musician is going to lead us into the land of milk and honey and lead us into the land of peace. It's not going to happen. We have to deal with the injustices that are happening in the world, whether they be in Jamaica or injustices around the world in general. Okay? It's time for us to come to grips with that. So this general elections, or this local government elections rather, in Jamaica, is just a symbol, right, of democracy. It has nothing to do with democracy. Because at the end of the day, we don't even know what our government is doing. And people tell me, oh, the budget. Yeah, that is what they have shown to you. Behind the scenes there is another budget. There's another budget, right? We know that you have the black budget in the United States and the transparent budget in the United States. Yeah. And the United States is supposed to be the exemplar of democracy, right? But you have a budget that is not shown to the American populace. So what do you think Jamaica is? Do you think Jamaica is more democratic than the United States? That it's going to be transparent with everything that it shows or does not show in the budget? It is not going to do that. It's going to show you what it wants you to see. And you have to dig a little deeper. And, you know, because of your trust in the government, I'm not suggesting now that you cannot look at the budget and, you know, and see, and, you know, you're not going to go there and knock down the prime minister's office and try to kill him, right? But what you are going to do, you are going to say, okay, that's what you have shown me. Let me see what you are about. And you begin to ask questions, and it continues, you begin to ask certain questions. But you look at the budget and you say, this is it, and that this is definitive. And oftentimes it is not definitive, right? It's time for us to be able now to come to grips with the realities. We've seen what happened 4 years ago. We've seen the effectiveness of governance around the world, around the world. And if we have not waken up, if we have not awakened, I should say, to these very, very, you know, truthful yet painful realities, then we are going to be deceived. And God, in his mercy, people are saying, why did God allow that? Because we don't listen. And a lot of times, the only way that we will listen is through God inflicting pain upon us. That is how he garners our attention. Without that, we are dancing and having fun. And exactly what the Jews did. They were constantly partying. They were constantly enjoying themselves and not heeding the voice of God. And God had to inflict, even set them into slavery. He had to have sent them into slavery for them to understand, for them to wake up. And even when he takes them out of slavery and they tell him that they're going to do everything that he wants them to do, they go right back in their human nonsense, right? Because the human heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Is deceitful, which means therefore that you're always deceiving yourself. You think that that's what you see, but oftentimes what you think you see because of what of your evil heart is not what is it. It's not what it is, right? And that's why we have to be careful of saying that we know and that this is a scientific evidence, and we can't think that. We have to always consult with God because he is the source of all wisdom and knowledge and understanding. So what we see is not necessarily what it is or what is there to be examined. Our hearts can deceive us. And that is why you have some of these dictators, like the Hitlers and the Mussolinis, right? These dictators came up because they thought, in some cases, what they were doing was just. Because they were responding to stimuli. And they want us also to respond to stimuli and not respond to the realities of life. Right? So it's time for us to wake up, and Jamaicans particularly, it's time for you to see that your local government elections or general elections do not matter if you are not taking the policies of the government seriously. These local and general elections do not matter if you do not understand that the political machinery in Jamaica is controlled by the local elites and also by the global elites. Local and government and the general elections do not matter if we do not have a country in which people can be safe, and we do not craft effective policies to combat the high levels of crime that is bedeviling the island. Yesterday, somebody responded to my video, Jamaica being, having a long democracy, by saying that, oh yeah, but we have crime all over the world. It is amazing when I got that response, because what is happening is that the Jamaican mindset is one in which it has been accustomed to these high levels of crime and violence and decadence, social and economic decadence. It has adapted itself. And I think it's going to take nearly 4 generations. Based on what we're seeing now, if things are going to change in Jamaica, it will take about 4 generations before you see any changes in society. 4, at least 4, because this has been going on since the 1970s. 3 the minute. Because generations have come and generations have gone, and all they're thinking is that, yes, this is what happens. This is the norm. Crime and violence is the norm, and other countries face it, and they're not taking into consideration that Jamaica is a very tiny island of just about 3 million people. And to be having 1,500 murders on average per year is ridiculous for an island nation that is so tiny. Something is fundamentally wrong with that picture. And the people are accepting that and seeing that they're living in democracy is the height of stupidity and also insanity. And I did tell you yesterday that the culture is insane. And one of the reasons that we're insane, and we're showing every day that we're insane, is that we are still pursuing the same policies year after year, generation after generation, and thinking that we're going to have a different result. And that is the height of insanity. And because of that insanity, we're seeing the high levels of homicide that we are witnessing on the island. All right. We also have to craft an economy that suits the Jamaican reality. It can't be what suits the global reality. And that is what we have been doing since 1962. We're depending on these foreign investors to come to Jamaica, and they're going to come and they're going to give us jobs, and then it's going to grow the economy. And that is not growing the economy for the people. It's growing the economy for these foreign investors and their people of their ilk. Right? And in many cases, the profits are repatriated. Right? The profits do not remain in Jamaica to build the economy. So when we talk about economic growth, it's more a short-term economic growth that we're talking about. It's more short-term economic growth that we're talking about. And by the way, in the 1960s, that is what they were pursuing, short-term economic growth, because at the time, Jamaica was the second, largest producer of bauxite in the world. I think it was followed by either Australia or Brazil, right? And the fact of the matter is that we depended on that so much that when by the time Michael Manley came with his social democratic philosophy, right, that went through the roof. And when that left us, the whole mining bauxite, the economy faltered. Because you cannot have your economy built on just one source of of, of wealth has to be built in many sectors, or several sectors at least. So if we had been building our agricultural sector, for example, during the mining era, developing food for people and to be exported with all the land that is in Jamaica, the fertile land that is there, we would not be in this mess. We also have depended too much on tourism. And tourism, by the way, is not going to build Jamaica. Tourism is not going to build Jamaica unless most of our people were the owners, and we would have to also see if they're also sending their profits away. Right? We have to have laws that govern the business operations, right? The entrepreneurial operations, rather, of these investors, these foreign investors, and our local also investors. It's time for us to wake up, and we have not yet awakened. And we do not want to be awakened because we're in this altered state of consciousness. Because we're dancing. It's all about dancing. And when you look at the local government elections in Jamaica, dancing was at the height of it. You just have to be entertained. You have to be constantly entertained, and the entertainment is going to send you to your death. This constant titivation and wanting to be entertained is going to send you to your death. It's time for us to wake up. The political machinery in Jamaica is not controlled by our local crop of politicians. And they are just dancing to the wind, and they are just trying to entertain you in a circus so that you will not pay attention to the substantive issues that need to be paid, that need your attention, but that you will continue to think that they are there to satisfy your needs and that they are there to build your economy. And they have not done that over the years. How long is it going to take you to understand that the two political parties in Jamaica are false? Right? They're not true. They're not going to lead you into any sort of development. This is now over 60-something years, and we've got to wake up. 62 years have passed. How many years have passed? 62 years have passed, and these people are not about to lead you into the land of milk and honey. They will never lead you into that land because they're not geared towards you. They're not prepared to leading you into that land. They are not committed to leading you into the land of milk and honey. That is not their agenda. And they're working laboriously with their foreign overlords to wreak untold suffering and agonies upon you. And if you did not see that some years ago, you are sleeping. You are sleeping, and you don't understand what went down because you are in this permanent state of coma, right? In which you just cannot wake up, behaving as zombies, really. It's time for us to wake up. Local and general government elections are not going to take Jamaica out of the current crisis. Let's stop the partying. Let's stop the circus, the political circus, the economic circus, and begin to build Jamaica. And I'm not sure, as I've said before, if that's possible at this juncture. I don't know if that is possible. I think we have long passed the Rubicon. And I don't think that at this moment, we'll be able to change anything significantly in any way in Jamaica. I do think, however, that perhaps maybe in the next 2 or 3 generations, if we begin the process of building, we will probably see, you and I would have probably left this earth by then. But if we mean future posterity something, if we want our children, grandchildren, other people to live and to survive, then it's worth the while. changing course, but we have to do it now. The entire political landscape in Jamaica has to be overhauled in a significant and revolutionary manner. It can't be just piecemeal changes here and there, as that what we're doing. Has to be revolutionized, uprooted, and replanted in a different soil, a soil that is healthy for Jamaica to be able to become a prosperous and well-developed nation state. Thank you so much for joining. I hope to see you in the next chat. Please be reminded to like, to share, subscribe, and leave comment, right? The algorithms, all right, are geared towards accepting like, and when you comment, for example, it triggers the algorithms to send or to share the videos with others. So it's important that you comment, that you like, okay, and that you subscribe. Thank you so much for the subscription. It has been growing. We are growing as a community, but we need to grow more significantly if we are going to have any sort of impact on the world, because this platform is geared towards educating and informing and bringing some form of awareness to not only Jamaica, but also to people of the world. Thank you so much for joining. Hope to see you in the next video.